Chris Kenny, your two-part documentary series Liberals in Power will air tomorrow night and Tuesday at 8 p.m. You've spoken extensively with all the key players in the 9 years of coalition government. And as part of that, you cover the fallout from Barnaby Joyce's affair whilst he was Deputy PM. And in typical Barnaby fashion, he was nothing if not candid in his response.
Barnaby made a shocking error of judgment.
I remember watching it on television.
In having an affair with a young woman working in his office.
And then going to the louvers, opening, I went, what's this dipstick up to?
Was the bonk ban an effort to force you out?
Yes, of course. And I remember saying to Peter Dutton, look, at the moment I'm gone as Deputy Prime Minister, Turnbull will be gone within 3 months. And this is an incredibly bombastic, egotistical statement, but it's the truth. When he lost me, he lost.
Chris, the documentary covers a pretty incredible 9 years of Australian political history.
Sure does.
Were you surprised by the reflections, in hindsight, looking back, the things that they focused on and reflected on in that period?
James, it was just fascinating talking to everyone. I mean, my interview with Barnaby was just so much fun. It was kind of crazy, and life is a bit like that with Barnaby. We did it in Parliament House while Parliament was sitting, so we got interrupted by the bells all the time. So it was on again, off again, and these great stories that he'd tell us when we're not right. Shut up, wait till the camera's rolling again. But what he says there is so spot on, right? The bonk ban was targeting him, it got rid of him, and then suddenly Malcolm Turnbull didn't have that Conservative as his right-hand man, and it really weakened his position. But the big picture story here, surely, because there's so many great little side stories and so many policy issues and events. We had COVID and all the rest of it. But the big picture surely is that after you had that 6 years of Rudd, Gillard, Rudd, where Labor just made an absolute hash of national government, and the Australian people elected Tony Abbott in a landslide. The whole idea was, we don't do this again. The grown-ups are in charge. There's no way anyone would be stupid enough to go down this path again. And then Tony Abbott didn't make it through the first term. And then Malcolm Turnbull didn't make it through the next term. Scott Morrison was the first Prime Minister since John Howard to go from one election to the next. But even then he got tossed out. So it's been a crazy period.
Well, speaking of John Howard, you spoke with him about the rise of the Teals at last year's election. Here's a bit of what he had to say.
There are those in the Liberal Party who say, really, to win back the Teal seats, you've got to implement the Teal agenda on climate change.
Well, you don't win anything back by embracing the other person's policy. The last thing the Liberal Party should try and do is be Labor light.
Chris, how confident are the Liberals in reclaiming those Teal seats? And John Howard's comments there about you don't want to be Labor light. Have they given up on them, or do they still think they can?
Look, I think it's a mixed bag. I think some of them might be easier to get back than others. I think, for instance, Wentworth, Malcolm Turnbull's old seat, where Allegra Spender is there, I think she comes across as a Liberal in Teal colours. I think she could be entrenched there for a long while to come. I think in Victoria, where you've got Monique Ryan, seems more like a lefty, as does Zoe Daniels. So people might wake up to them and realise they've effectively elected left of centre politicians, not sort of Liberals in Teal colours. But it's a fascinating policy debate for the Liberals, and I think that those people in the Liberal Party who are saying we need to sort of go left, become Teal to win those seats back, they forget that that's what they did at the last election. Scott Morrison went net zero by 2050. He tried to match Labor on climate, and it blew up in their face. So they've really got a big struggle to work out what are the key policies, where do they pitch them, and whether they... I agree with John Howard, who wouldn't? The guy's the master, of course, but you can't have a Teal-specific policy. You've got to think about the policies that are best for the country, and they'll win you back the suburban and regional seats, and they'll probably get you some of the Teal seats back as well eventually.
Now, we've got to talk about this strip club issue, but just before we leave the documentary, I've got to ask you, did Malcolm Turnbull agree to be part of this?
No, Malcolm Turnbull doesn't talk to me anymore. As I keep confessing, I was Chief of Staff to him back in 2009 when he was opposition leader, and I've had a long relationship with him, but he doesn't talk to Sky News anymore or me. So it's a pity we didn't get to interview him, but there you go.
Well, I'm sure he'll be tuning in as the rest of us will. Yes. Make sure you do. 8 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time tomorrow night for part 1, and then part 2 on Tuesday night. Chris Kenny's documentary, Liberals in Power.